Hey guys, hold on a second here. There we go. Ooh, got a little bit of delay here. Let me fix that. Make sure everything's working properly. There we go. I think we're good now. I had the analytics window up, and sometimes if I don't forget to turn the volume down, then yeah, that kind of thing happens. Wait, huh? It's a little weird. Weird little update from the SPC website. Okay, there we go. That's about right. It's like, no, for a fact there's not an enhanced risk today. I know I'm not losing my mind. There's no way I would have missed that. Then again, I've missed things before, so I'm only human. Anyway, though, oops, clicked the wrong thing. Switching this back and forth. Right. There we go. So, I have made a mistake, however, though. I was anticipating that the HRRR would start to upload around 8:30 Eastern. It's 9 o'clock, and, well, as you can see, we haven't made much progress on here. And also my lights are off. Alexa, lights on. Alexa, lights on? Dang. I've had that thing for a few years. I think it might be time to replace it, but yeah, this is a little bit of a pickle. I was thinking that we would have been a little bit further along. That's why I kind of prefer daylight savings time, because this uploads a lot faster. Like literally an hour earlier. It makes a world of difference. So we aren't really in range for tomorrow as of right now. We're like kind of on the edge of it right now. In fact, we're not even close to that yet, which kind of sucks. I guess we could probably start with the global models and work our way from there. Hopefully, it'll buy us a little bit of time because, I mean, the severe weather pattern itself just isn't really going anywhere. It's going to remain pretty busy across the board. But for right now, I can't really get heavily into the details just yet. What we can do, at least for right now, is get into our outlook map, and this is kind of what we have. We're still a bit limited considering the fact that it's a day 2 and day 3 risk. We can talk about day 2 a little bit more in depth because we actually have the hazard map on here. Tomorrow's threat entails a 5% tornado threat, and this has shifted a little bit further to the north now. So now we're looking at central parts of North Dakota particularly. And it kind of makes sense considering how everything kind of set up here based off of the dinner time models that I looked at. We're kind of in the middle of a model cusp, so I always try to time my videos where I'm just a little bit after, so I have all the the most recent information. Everything's kind of fresh. But the big threat tomorrow is really going to be damaging winds. There is a notable hail threat as well, but I think as we go progressively throughout the evening and into the overnight, we're going to see more along the lines of damaging winds. I think the tornado and hail threat is going to be earlier in the day. This is why you see that hail threat a little bit further off towards the west. So based off what I've been seeing, I would expect the storm mode as of right now to really be comprised mostly of supercells earlier and then eventually kind of consolidating into a line as we progress further off towards the east. So I'm expecting more along the line of tornadoes towards the central part of the state, which makes sense. And then we're going to watch this kind of consolidate into an MCS most likely by evening. Hey, what's up, Emmanuel? I don't know. Just as long as this will end up having a take here. I'm really trying to hold out until we get that latest info from the HRRR. Because those 0Z runs often come in pretty clutch. And they usually do pretty well. But yeah, timing was just not on my side tonight. So we'll see what happens, Justin. But I'm free to hang out for a while. For a little bit at least. So if you have anything in mind, feel free to run it by me. Good to see you though, Manuel. Yeah, I'm probably gonna be alive. I'm probably gonna be live long enough for that. So, I mean, it's no pressure. I mean, All these often end up like uploading as well. Hey Renita, how you been? I know it's been a little while. The fact that you haven't needed to watch has probably been a good thing. Yeah, I mean, I still want to talk about that too. Yeah, I'm still going to talk about the tropics. Because I mean, that is something that we do have to discuss on here. Well, I'm starting to think more and more, at least in the short term, that we're not going to see much in the way of any impacts with that. But of course, it's always good to stay up to date. Like I said, with us being on a model cusp here, I'm pretty sure the ensembles might have uploaded by now. Like I said, I want to make a video on the model cusp thing, but the thing about that is, it's like every time I think I have the timeline hampered down like I did there, because usually the HRRR uploads about 8:30ish, 8:45ish, but and it might have, but it's just uploading slower today, I guess. So it's always hard. So that one's a really hard. That always is a harder video to make. But I just about have it done, or at least so I think, until the next thing comes up. Glad to hear that you're well. The weather hasn't been too bad over there, I'm assuming. Yeah, earthquakes, volcanoes, and tsunamis as well. Yeah, I mean, I've been keeping track of stuff. It's just there's only so much I can make a video on. As far as the tsunamis, I was like, I want to stream it, but how do I go about doing it? It's kind of a weird situation to be in. I haven't managed to do it though, so I'm like, maybe I could figure it out in the future. But yeah, the hurricanes and tsunami ones would be really hard, and I wouldn't want to make it. I also kind of don't want to make an expectation of me trying to stream everything because it's unrealistic. I mean, Evan gets to do this full time, and I don't, sadly. And he's got a whole team behind him now, or he's building a team behind him. We're definitely not there yet, but one day. Oh, so while we're at it, we'll talk about tomorrow's, or not tomorrow, but Friday's risk. Yeah, much better than what it was earlier this season, right, Renita? I'm sure you prefer that compared to what you were getting earlier this year. There's you had a little bit of grief to deal with. And at least for right now, that's pretty much how it's going to stay. It's just going to be mostly showers and thunderstorms, basically the summertime special. Anyway, though, let's go ahead and talk about this really quickly here for Friday's threat. And really with Friday's threat, I've actually been kind of eyeballing this over the last few days, especially if you were a member by chance. I put up a video a couple of days ago highlighting how Friday really seems to be kind of the most intriguing out of the two, well, now enhanced risk days. But I even called this area out in particular that has that 30% hatched risk a little bit in advance. Everything just looked like it was kind of coming together quite nicely over there. The biggest question with this is going to revolve mostly around the storm mode, and we're really not going to know much until really the storms start to fire and kind of progress. So I'm really intrigued to see what Friday in particular has to offer. I do think that, like Thursday, this will end up being an all hazards type of day, but it's unclear exactly what we will see out of this. But I do think damaging winds will probably be the dominant story, but if we can get some decent venting, we can still get our fair share of supercells and keep our tornado potential pretty high. Oh, guess we'll keep so in the meantime, I guess we'll try and work with it, not HRRR, but I guess we'll have to work with GFS because, like I said, the timing was not on my side today. Because it's always weird how it works. It's one of those things where sometimes the GFS, or not the GFS, but the HRRR will load up really fast, and other days it'll be a little bit slower. And unfortunately today, that's kind of the situation. So at least we'll talk about these first couple of days and then kind of go on from there. I would go back and use the 18Z from HRRR but the problem with that is that info is about to be phased out. So if I use that and in the stream and my forecast ends up being wrong, then yeah, that's not a good look for me. But here's a general rundown of what we have going on right now. So this is our trough, and this is going to be our big catalyst behind our severe weather potential tomorrow. Really, I would expect storms to fire a little bit later into the evening. You can kind of see the upslope of this trough right here, and this is where things kind of get interesting. You can kind of see some development in the jet stream here. You're looking for diffluence here where the air begins to spread apart. Notice how at first it's kind of more solid, and then also as the winds pick up in the upper levels, this kind of spreads here. That is one of the first of many telltale signs that you would look for. But that trough is your lifting mechanism, and this is one of your 3 levels to assess wind shear at as well. So we're already checking off at least 1 box here, and potentially even 2. If we go to the lower level of the atmosphere in regards to tomorrow, you can kind of see a pretty similar look there. Shortwave is not quite that pronounced in comparison to other storm systems we've seen this season, so a little bit of a surprise there. But so like I said, it's kind of one of those touch and go things. Uh-oh. Did we get disconnected here? No, we didn't. Okay. I've been really paranoid also with this as of late due to the fact that, well, the internet and the power over here has been very touch and go here. So I'm hoping that we don't get disconnected. So if you suddenly lose me, blame either Georgia Power or Xfinity. It's one or the other. But anyway, though, if we're looking at the shortwave, though, it's kind of right where we would expect it to be, towards the central part of North Dakota. South Dakota does have a risk, but I think with that shortwave kind of retreating to the north, I think the overall threat shifts north as well to go with it. Now, if we continue to move this forward, we'll watch that head out of here, and then we'll see that threat kind of propagate off to the east here. Looking at this, I'm actually seeing a little bit of a slight downtrend with this, and maybe a little bit more progression of a threat maybe off to the east now. So a lot's really happened since I last looked at the models for lunchtime here. Well, really I would say it was about like 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock-ish when I started to look at the what's technically considered the dinner time models. But you can still see that trough being the main factor here going forward. So it's kind of one of these, I think that Friday has the potential to be a notable day, but also kind of one of those touch and go type of days as well. So I think this is going to really come down to the wire as to what kind of storm mode we end up getting, and really just how widespread the event could be. I still would think for the most part it'll end up being relatively isolated here. So I guess at this point we're going to start to kind of take a look at the more juicy parameters here. This is where we start to really hone in on our particular threats here. And of course, low level jet, we're always looking at that tornado threat. And this is what really kind of captured my interest with this when I first looked at it a few days earlier, was seeing that low level jet that kind of pops up here. We've been ranging, and I would say averaging between different models at about maybe 30 to 40 knots. And that's more than sufficient enough, with other parameters included, to produce a couple of tornadoes. Now, is there a chance that there could be a stronger one or a very photogenic one? I mean, yeah. I wouldn't say that it's a guarantee, but North Dakota in particular has kind of been overperforming this year, so I'm keeping that trend in mind as well. It's not something that I would recommend relying on if you're looking at doing a legitimate forecast here, but I just want to make sure that I clarify that I am on to you, North Dakota. All jokes aside, though, interesting setup over here that definitely leans into an early tornado threat, but definitely kind of lends itself to damaging winds as we get later into the evening. With the way the forcing was set up in the upper levels, like I said, I think we could get a couple of supercells early, but as more storms begin to fire, they're going to merge and consolidate into a line as we get later into the evening. Now, in regards to moisture, we have plenty of transpiration or corn sweat, the crops are producing perspiration and it's going up in the atmosphere. And that's going to serve as our moisture source. So that already checks off another box that checks out the moisture box. So we're at least at 2. And then really with the low level jet coming in from the south going north, that really checks off 3 boxes. We have speed and directional shear. We have our lift source coming from the trough here, and here is our moisture source to go with it. Dew points in the 60s, so more than sufficient enough. So really at this point, in regards to Thursday, and really we'll go ahead and take a look at Friday as well. We'll kind of jump back to the low level jet as well too. But if you look at Friday's setup as well, you can see plenty of moisture still available. In fact, even better moisture source, if I'm being honest. We can see that the dew points are in the 70s. So, like I said, plenty of moisture to go around. Now, if we were to go ahead and take a look at the low-level jet, this is actually a little bit of a downtrend in comparison to what I've seen. And like I said, a little bit more of a push off to the east here. So, the trough progression and the trough orientation, the angle in which the trough is pointing, I think is going to play a bigger factor. Don't be surprised if we see a shift off to the east here. Maybe over towards more parts of central and maybe northeastern parts of Minnesota now. I wouldn't say that it's a guarantee, but it's something that I would at least keep an eye on. So now that we've talked about that, let's go ahead and actually get a look at that instability. We can get these storms to fire though. Then we're fire around this region, then we're talking about plenty of instability, and if these can make it into this region, then we're talking about increased intensity with these storms as well. Look at that though. So put in perspective for any of you that are a little bit newer, 1,000 joules of CAPE is enough to support severe weather and even tornadoes. We're sitting over 5,000 at this point, so very impressive amount of energy that's available within the atmosphere. So pretty much an explosive environment. If we go back a day prior, we also have pretty sufficient instability as well. CAPE values are also pretty high. A little bit of a downtrend, surprisingly, from the GFS here. In comparison to what I was seeing earlier from the dinner time HRRR, I'm kind of not sure how to really feel about this, because if I'm being completely honest, sometimes the global models will occasionally downplay the amount of instability available, so kind of leaves me intrigued as to what our actual CAPE count will end up being for the day. But we could easily range anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 joules per kilogram. So regardless of which model we're looking at here, the instability is going to be plentiful. So I guess for now, what we'll do, since we're pretty much stuck with using the GFS over the HRRR, I guess we'll try and do a combination plot here. We're going to take a look at a couple of SQTs and then just kind of roll with it from there. But like I said, it's a little bit hard to work with the GFS because certain parameters are lacking on this one, whereas with other models, we're kind of all over the place. And this is a great example as to why I went a little bit too far to the west here, actually. Okay, so the most rich CAPE is down here, but that's not where our primary severe threat's going to be. It will be more so over here. But if we look here in comparison, well, actually still is pretty good. Okay, so yeah, it's the first time I've looked at the dinner time soundings from the GFS, because that actually loaded, like I said, about a couple hours earlier. But from what I'm seeing here, though, at the very least, still have a relatively good environment. The one detractor from this in regards to severe weather potential really has a lot more to do with these two parameters here, the lift-free condensation right here in the LCL as well, the lift condensation level. Basically, these are cloud bases. If you're looking for tornadic development, you want these to be below this number right here, the 850. And you see how high these are, so these are higher up into the atmosphere. As a result, makes things a little bit more difficult. The storm's a little bit elevated as well, which kind of works against it. And that has a lot to do with this spread between the dew point and the temperature. So we have ample moisture, but that surface temperature is so high and spread apart from it, we have a little bit of dryness towards this level of the atmosphere. And if we have a wet bulb that's a little bit closer towards the surface, usually these storms will have a slightly better chance of producing tornadoes. But this is a good sounding for hail, and also a really good sounding for damaging winds. Good parameter to look at on this QT is the D cape here. We're sitting at 1600 plus joules per kilogram here, so damaging wind definitely looking like the favorite hazard on the GFS here, to say the least. If we go into the following day, so let's go ahead and look a little bit more into Friday. Friday has so much energy available, and it's almost insane to think about. I still think that while I'd say the parameters are a little bit more ideal for the areas off to the east here, I think that if we were to push this a little bit further along, it would look a little bit better. So with the amount of energy that we have available here, we still have a severe mode that's probable with this, but this definitely leans into a more linear event. Storms would probably be forming right along the frontal boundary itself here. Out ahead of it is where the best parameters are for tornadoes. So it becomes more conditional based off what the GFS is showing. If we can get a storm to fire out ahead of where the main line would be setting up, could get tornadoes, but at this point, definitely thinking damaging wind sounding. Definitely has that look of a microburst here for sure. There is a little bit of inhibition here, but with that frontal boundary, we can knock that little capping inversion or inhibition out of the way here. So that definitely lends itself a little bit further along with that wind threat here. So most likely we're going to see a 30% enhanced risk for damaging winds. Hail might be a 30. I think we might get a 15 hatched based off what we're seeing with GFS. So a lot more questions than I have answers at this point, just based off of the GFS alone. I'm actually going to check HRRR really quickly here. Oops, and I can't spell to save my life. That was embarrassing. Okay, well, at least we can look at tomorrow, but we still can't look at Friday as of yet because it hasn't loaded in. Like I said, the timing is everything on here, and it looks like I just kind of got bit in the back end because of that. But anyway, let's go ahead and take a look at the surface cape and compare it to what we were seeing on the GFS. So this is tonight's cape. Not really going to be much of a factor. Storms aren't really developed in a way to really take advantage of that. So let's go ahead and jump into the day tomorrow. And see, this is kind of what I'm talking about when it comes to looking at our instability, like our values such as cape. You can see that the HRRR is much more aggressive with this. We're easily showing 4,000 joules per kilogram of cape. I actually think I just saw 45 on here. Yep, there it is right there, 45.32. Now, if you remember what we were seeing earlier, I'm going to backtrack again so that way you can see it. Okay, so this is the 8 o'clock sounding for Thursday. It's the same area right here. I'm going to close that out. Look at that. I don't know what's going on with OBS. I think it's strictly an OBS issue that I'm having here. Why that is, I have no idea. But if you are starting to experience any lagging issues, definitely remember to, just a reminder to refresh the stream. I guess I'm going to have to try to get this done as quick as I can. But what I'm saying though, in regards to tonight's or tomorrow's threat, we get the HRRR outcome here. It's a little bit more suitable for tornadoes here. Notice the LFC and the LCL that I was talking about earlier, much lower to the ground. That increased cape is helping with that. We also have higher hail parameters, damaging wind parameters are just about as high. Supercell parameters are also up on this one, and the low level shear is much more impressive on this than what it was with, let's say, the GFS. So stark comparison here, but it's those finite details that you always have to keep in mind if you're going to do these kinds of forecasts. So let's go ahead and, dang it, I wish I really could get a better look at Friday's forecast. Still got another 16 scans to go. Actually only goes to 48, but we can at least get a look at hour by hour when the storms begin to fire and kind of go on from there. We get some early development, it looks like, over here towards Montana, and then as we go later into the day, these storms really start to ramp up in intensity as we go. Once we get to that peak area where we have that instability, this could break down into supercells or stay consolidated as a line here. The convective mode, again, as I mentioned before, is really going to be a key determining factor, really for both days. And then here's our main line that develops here. That MCS, because of all that energy that was out ahead of it, still holds up pretty well. But with this, you can also see that we have this big line here. This almost looks like a bow echo, maybe trying to develop a really strong MCS. And as a result, this would have damaging winds that would occur into the overnight and maybe even into the morning. So we do stream here. It's going to be a late night stream that could last all the way into the following morning. Now this is the full extent of the range that I have available on HRRR, so I can't really get a good look at the following day. I'm really excited to see what happens with this once we get these next 15 scans in. But just based off what we've seen off of these two models that we've just looked at, it shows that we have an environment that's primed and capable of all hazards here. Oh boy, what's going on here? What's going on here? Okay. Yeah, it looks like OBS has been giving me a real fit today. I might have to actually go check my Ethernet cable. Hopefully that's not going to be the case, but yeah, we're definitely struggling here. And also a reminder, guys, don't forget to hit that like button too. Definitely helps us out here. But I don't know what the heck is going on with my operating system, with my OBS here. I might have to, I might have to step back real quick. I will be right back, because I think I know what the problem is, but I'm not entirely sure yet. Wait, now it's starting to stabilize. I don't know what's going on with this thing. And now it's doing it again. Yeah, I'll be right back. I'm gonna check my Ethernet real quick, see what's going on with it, because it just keeps on jumping back and forth for whatever reason. Wow, it was the most simple of problems. I actually just checked it. Somebody knocked the Ethernet plug-in loose from the outside, and that's really the reason why it was so skimpy. I was like, wait, it's never done this before. That was so weird. But yeah, the plug was just loose. I just fixed it, and from what I can see right now, it looks like it's already doing a heck of a lot better. I tell you, guess I should just start inspecting my house before streams. Anyway, though, at least it was an easy fix. Okay, so guess while we wait, we can talk about the tropics too. 'Cause I mean, that is a big topic right now. To a point, it's kind of irrelevant. Mainly due to the fact that these areas are of very little concern right now. This is kind of one thing that I had talked about in the tropical update I had put up the other day. This does have a great chance of development, but the thing about it is this area seems, this disturbance now, it seems more and more likely that it's actually going to get pushed out to sea. There have been a lot of operational model runs that have been showing this, maybe even pushing towards Florida, towards the East Coast. And I was having to tell a few people, hey, look, this is not one of those situations where you just latch onto a model that's showing a hurricane making landfall 15 days out. Those models at the long range can be kind of unreliable. Sometimes they're right, but it's very few and far in between you when you get a run that aggressive and have it verify all the way to the end. Not saying that it can't, but it's very rare. And more often than not, you'll see a scenario like this kind of pop up. Now, the only real place I could see this impacting land right now would probably be towards Bermuda, especially if this thing ramps up in the next few days here. The catch-22 with this would really have to do with the storm if it were to remain weak. If this storm remains weak, maybe it goes on the southern end of this track here, and then maybe that will be an impact towards the 60-degree west line and areas further off to the west like us. But I don't really see that happening. This is a pretty good environment, and I would say that this will probably end up being our next named storm. There's still a chance for this area in the yellow to be our next named storm as well, but as of right now, I wouldn't count on that. So I wouldn't be too worried if you're on the coastline as of right now. It's a little bit too early, to say the least. Hi, Mia. But yeah, as far as any sort of tropical impacts, I wouldn't be worried about too much. Okay, so I guess I could go on to, I'd probably just go on to tropical tidbits here. So I don't think that was an invest area either. Okay, no, it is an invest. They did up it to an invest. I didn't see it earlier today, so I was trying to figure out what model I could use, what model I can and can't use, because that actually matters on here. So here's 96. So let's get a look at her. Or him. Well, it doesn't identify as anything. We're not going to get into that anyway. Dear God. Okay, so I think I want to try to use parent, so that way I want to try to look at the overall environment here. There we go. It's precisely what I want. Okay, so I know this might be a little bit jarring to some of you, but if we actually switch gears from hurricanes to tornadoes, it's kind of the opposite, believe it or not, when it comes to wind shear. You actually want less wind shear when it comes to hurricanes. Tornadoes, you kind of want a little bit more wind shear. Not too much. You kind of have to be in the Goldilocks zone for that. But if you look at this really closely, you can see that with these lighter colors here, that represents lower wind shear, and that's what you would want for tropical development. These areas in the red, that's strong wind shear, and usually if you run across that with a tropical system, it ends up tearing the storm apart. So it's kind of a wacky run, obviously, considering the fact that, well, that low pressure just seems to be all over the place. And I don't really like looking at these while they're invest. But at least if the storm were to stay on the track that's being projected by the Hurricane Center, this is an environment that's most ideal for development going forward. If we were to go ahead and look at the moisture content here, we're going to have to set ourselves back towards the beginning. This could be a parameter that helps maybe keep it weak, but yeah, it kind of gets, the model kind of just gets useless after that. In fact, to think that it would go all the way into South America just based off of that run is kind of crazy. Actually, I'd say it's even a little bit funny. Because, I mean, it doesn't develop, so I wouldn't expect it to harm anyone if this did play out, but still. based off what 96L has to offer, there is from the HAFS, it does look like there's going to be some dry air that it runs into, which could again help keep that storm weaker and maybe keep the track a little further south. But it's I'd say this forecast is going to be relatively difficult. It's going to be one of those touch and go type of situations. Now, one thing that's going in the storm's favor in regards to its development is definitely the sea surface temperatures. So I would say anything that's above 26 degrees Celsius is good for tropical development. Anything at about 26 to 27. And if you want to understand how I got that number, even though I could just say 81, you just multiply the number by 3 to keep it pretty simple. The exact number is 2.7 if I remember correctly. But just multiply by 3 and just keep it kind of simple. Multiplying decimals can get a little bit messy at times. Anyway, though, you can see here that once we get further and further along to the 40-degree west line and beyond, those sea surface temperatures are like bath water, which is more than ideal for tropical development. So, like I said, for the most part, even though this model's been kind of wonky, I would expect a lot more in the way of development with this invest area going forward. But given the upper level winds, I wouldn't expect it to go south. I would expect it to go north. So with that in mind, with it making a turn more so this way instead of heading west northwest or west southwest or anything like that, I wouldn't expect any impacts to the US right now, at least from this one. During this time of year, though, we always have to watch the West African coast. So as a result, I would say that we're far from finished here, and in fact, we're getting towards the peak of hurricane season. Let me go ahead and actually pull up the satellite imagery so I can give you a better idea of what I'm talking about. So if we're looking at satellite here, this is our invest area here. And then if you look off West African coast here towards the Verde Islands, you can see more and more in the way of shower and thunderstorm activity. And as this goes over the water, if it develops any kind of spin, this starts to become an invest area, and then we start to see that snowball effect begin to occur. Now, obviously, sea surface temperatures, dry air, and also, of course, wind shear are going to be key factors in helping the storm either develop or dissipate. So we always have to watch that. We do have that other storm here, Dexter, by the way, which is pretty much being sheared apart. And this is a great example of what I was talking about a second ago with wind shear being a detriment to tropical development here. That shear on the north side literally has torn all the thunderstorms away from the center of circulation, which is actually right over here. If you look really closely, you can kind of see the spin and the remnant clouds from it, which is pretty cool, actually. And then you see this other invest area right here, which is struggling to hang on right now. So I'm not too sure what we'll see in regards to development out of this, but all we can do is just kind of go forward from that point with this one. But yeah, I'm really putting more attention to this area, if anything. And even then, I'm not guaranteeing any real impacts from this anywhere towards the lower 48. Bermuda maybe, but that's about it. Okay, we're almost there now. We got 4 more scans. I'm just trying to pass the time so I can get you the information I really wanted to give you. So yeah, I guess this discussion is going to be a little over an hour. We sometimes will average about maybe 45 minutes to an hour. This might be all the way up to like 90 minutes. But thank you all for tuning in up to this point, though, too, I want to say also. There's a decent number of you watching. If you could, though, I would definitely appreciate it again if you could hit that like button. I'd like to see if we could maybe get to 15 if it's all possible. I'm showing 10 right now on the screen. So that would be 5 more likes maybe. But anyway, though. Let's see what the models have to offer in the long range here. We'll do a quick run through the GFS ensemble here. The European ensemble at this time frame only shows 144 hours, so it's kind of a moot point to use it, because we're trying to look into the long range. We kind of have a good idea of what we're going to be dealing with over the next 7 days for the most part. Probably do a tropical outlook maybe in the morning. Okay, so let's go into the long range here. And then we can also take a look at that high pressure that's going to help potentially steer this out to sea. And that's really going to be the main reason why I'm not concerned about any sort of land impacts as of right now. If this were to really strengthen to like a major hurricane, I would expect maybe some rip currents at best. But that's really about it. Now the ridge is pretty weak, however, and it's a little bit further up towards the north, so maybe it wouldn't pull it out to sea? Question mark? It really depends on how quickly it strengthens. Because the thing is, as the storm begins to strengthen and those cloud tops grow taller, it's more likely to be affected by the winds in the upper levels of the atmosphere. And that's why I was saying that it makes a difference at whichever intensity the system is. If it still remains an invest, then it can stay further to the south. If it grows into a big tropical storm or hurricane, we see that pull off to the north and east begin to occur. But one detail that I'm of course keeping an eye on, as I do anytime that I look at this, is the wind shear over the main development region. There is a nice little corridor right here where we're likely to see very little wind shear, and that would be enough to help maybe propagate additional development as we go later into the month. So while I would say that as of right now there are no immediate impacts or threats to land, we'll be looking in the long range to see if that continues. One would only hope that it would continue to be that way. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and take a look at the ensemble members, and then that should bring us to the time frame that we need in order to finally get a look at HRRR. I'm really sorry about the delay, because I was expecting the model to load much earlier. Okay, so looking at the forecast for the week plus range here, I can see that we have additional low pressure areas or areas of interest here, highlighted by these yellowish colors here. And then the GFS ensemble has been pretty aggressive, as it typically is. What I'm most interested in the long range is just seeing where these kind of group up. The track is really where I kind of disregard at the moment, because I mean, look at the range we're at, 336 hours. We're passing almost 2 weeks in range here, so any small change with this ends up getting this forecast here gets thrown out the window essentially. So it's one of those really finite, really intricate situations where we're looking at a hypothetical scenario where something ends up forming and maybe a U.S. impact will be possible. But keep in mind, and the reason why I don't hype this up is because we're talking about storm systems that haven't even come off the West African coast, let alone even formed. So no real point in trying to hype up something that isn't even there. It's basically like trying to get people to believe ghosts. Believe that there's a ghost in your room. You often end up sounding like a crazy person, unless you just know for a fact that it's coming. But anyway, let's go ahead and get into the forecast for Friday, finally. Sorry to have kept you guys waiting. Like I said, it was just one of those deals where we were just stuck waiting on new model data to come in, and now we should be able to be at the very edge of our range here so we can get a good look at what's going on as we get later into the evening, and we're just barely in range too. Literally 1 hour's difference. And again, notice though, and I'm actually gonna go all the way, instead of going to the Cape first, I'm gonna actually check something out really quick with this. I think that with this time frame here, there might be potentially 2 rounds with this. But also the interesting thing that I'm kind of catching on to here is also the fact that HRRR and its trough progression, it's a little bit slower than the GFS. So that's going to be something that we might have to bring up tomorrow before our live stream as well. Because if I look at if I were to go ahead and click the 500 here, if it would work. Okay, there it goes. Yeah, the GFS had this much further along. So, quick look here again. So let's go to 48 hours here. Or actually 54 hours. If you compare the two, this is GFS that we're looking at now. And then if we click here, they look about the same. I think it's the orientation that's a little bit different. I think the GFS, the HRRR might be a little bit more of a negative tilt maybe, and that's why it's a little bit slower. Or maybe it's the shortwave that's progressing a little bit slower. So it looks like we try to get a renegade shortwave that pops up later in the evening. And maybe the HRRR is a little bit further on board with, maybe it's a little bit more on board with the GFS than I thought. But the only problem is we're right at the limit of our range with this here. But if I were to put everything else together along with it, like our Cape for example, because we already know there's going to be plenty of moisture there. Everything kind of pans out a little further south. So if I were to click this sounding here, a little bit similar of a deal, but of course with a little bit more Cape and also a closer temperature to dew point spread. Those cloud bases are still pretty elevated. Definitely still kind of leans into that damaging wind potential more so than tornado potential. It stays pretty low. So I'm going to try and go a little further south here with the sounding. Or maybe a little further east. Because I would still expect our storms to initiate over towards this point. And this looks a little bit better. It's just the surface thermos are not as good. Like lapse rates are relatively shallow. You want them to be a little bit steeper like they are towards the upper levels. You can see it on the bottom of the screen here. The font is a little small, and I do apologize. But let's say if you were looking towards the mid levels of the atmosphere and you were looking at the lapse rates, notice how it's 8.9 right here, and then you look at the surface to 3 kilometers, which is basically the lower level of the atmosphere, the part that we deal with down on the ground. It's all the way down to 5.6. You want those lapse rates to be a little bit more steep than that. So this could be a little bit of a limiting factor here. Like I said, the more I've been looking at this forecast from this set of model runs here, I have a lot more questions than I do answers now at this point. It seems like there's a lot more conditional criteria and a lot more questions there in regards to potential development going forward here. Yeah, and it's pretty much the same thing across the board here. I don't really see a whole lot that's different from the HRRR in a sense, but we have a little bit less range. I might actually make a morning video about this. I might be doing a lot of content tomorrow. So of course we're going to still have to keep up with the tropics. For this area right here, I'm not fully disregarding this either, but the other parameters don't really come together, as you'll see here. There's plenty of energy, but look at that. We don't really have any storms developing over towards this area. And you can get excited about low level shear, storm relative velocity, all those other parameters, but if there's not really much anything there, what do you have? You have really nothing. It could be windy over here, that's really about it, but it's not really a storm to take advantage of said environment. And this is why you don't hype up SKU-T charts unless you know what's already going to be there. The SKU-Ts should be like one of the last things that you do. Looking at your SKU-Ts or looking at other particular parameters like the significant tornado parameter. Only thing you're doing then is scaring people for a situation that may not even occur. If we do take a look at that STP though, it's pretty low actually, which is a surprise. I'm actually really intrigued to look at tomorrow more so than Friday now at this point. Oh, okay. Okay. That's interesting. That's really interesting. And I think this will be the parameter. Well, no, there's one other parameter we'll look at before we close out the stream here. But yeah, that definitely is intriguing right there. Supercell were to pop up closer towards that border like I mentioned earlier, and I'm still thinking that that area could be a point of interest if it weren't for a lack of low-level jet. That, like I said, there could be a conditional strong tornado that would be possible with this. Not saying that it's a guarantee, but I do think that there is a small chance that the potential is there. And it's definitely something worth paying attention to as we go through the day tomorrow. I expect this, of course, to be occurring right at or just after sundown. And the unique thing about North Dakota and South Dakota is that the sunset over here actually occurs a little bit later than most areas, I've noticed. Sunset will sometimes occur right at about 9 o'clock local time for these regions. Whereas my area, by 9 o'clock, the sun's completely set at this point. It's pretty much dark. So that little bit of extra daytime heating could also come into play here. So always got to be aware of the topography here. So little interesting stat for you guys. I guess now we'll go ahead and get a look at the reflectivity here, kind of get an idea of what the timing is for our storm development tomorrow. So this is us heading into early morning. Here's that little complex of storms that's heading through Montana by early morning. I do think that the outflow boundaries of this will also help aid in our severe weather development as we get later into the day. So as this storm passes, notice how this kind of pops up adjacent to it on the southwest side of that. I think this forms as a result of outflow. And then you can almost actually see the tail kind of pop up here on the back side of this. The amount of instability that we have available along with that outflow boundary to help further fuel these storms is going to be the driving force behind our damaging wind and really our tornado threat as a whole as we get later into the evening. Time we get into the following day, one would think that we would have a similar setup with this, but I can't get a clear look at what time the development would be with this because we're at the end of our range here. Now, if I were to go ahead and take a look at the GFS, the reason I don't like using reflectivity with the GFS has got a lot more to do with the fact that it's not high resolution like HRRR. So not as pretty of a picture for you guys to look at, and I apologize, but beggars can't be choosers at this point. And see, the other thing with this is that it goes by a 3-hour span here, this range. And whereas we were looking at it hour to hour here, we're kind of left in the dark. Doesn't really even show storms firing too, which is kind of irritating as well. I think with Friday's event, it's not going to be as long term as perhaps Thursday's event to go with that. So it makes things, like I said, it makes things a little bit more difficult. So I don't really have the full story here just by looking at this. It does look like it might be an overnight threat based off what GFS is trending as. But like I said, with that 3-hour gap here, I can't get a full read on this. I really won't be able to until tomorrow. unless the NAM 3 kilometer is done loading, which it's just now starting. So, like I said, it's one of the. This has been one of those things where the models have been kind of updating too slow. My timing was just a little bit off, but this is basically the general rundown with what I have available in regards to our threats for Thursday and Friday. Obviously, we kind of know the deal with Thursday. I would say right around the twilight hours towards the Dakotas is going to be a point of interest. It's where we would expect some of our strongest storms to develop. That's probably around the time we'll end up going live. There could be some tornadoes earlier in the day, maybe mid-evening, I would say, as well. So our current live time tomorrow is going to be questionable, but we'll see how things go. Hopefully, we shouldn't have any issues there. And then, of course, Friday's a big question mark right now as to what time we would go live with that as well, or if we would even go live, depending on the scenario that plays out. But if something does go up on Friday, we're definitely going to be live for that as well. We're going to be live for at least one of the two enhanced risks, that's for sure. But that's pretty much all I got for you guys. I appreciate you all for tuning into the discussion. It's most that I've seen in a discussion for a while, and quite a while here, and I appreciate you all for that. This one was ad-free, and we'll try to keep the discussions at least ad-free in the future here. We'll see what happens, though. But till then, everybody take care. Have a wonderful rest of your night, and I will see you all next time.